that today I officially put in my resignation letter to the town of Winchester. That my final working day will be the first Friday in January. But so in my original last planning board meeting was going to be December 13th. So now it's going to be December 20th, that's the last one in 2022. So I will not be here for any planning board meetings in 2023.
Or 24 or 25.
Yeah. Yeah. Either. Yes. All of those as well. Yes. But that leads into the other update, which is that because I'm leaving in that time, right now, the highest priority for me is to get compliance with MBTA Section 3A zoning. So that is just so. Oh, Brian. Also, is there? I was not able to get in touch with Brian Manter at the time, but Diab, do we need the assistant town engineer this evening?
He's right there.
No, I'm saying, do we need, is he, I don't necessarily want.
We welcome his presence, but we do not require it, I don't think.
Not for tonight's agenda. Okay.
Yeah.
So I guess there is this time at the end here that we would be talking about planner transition, but just in terms of an update, very quickly, is that the compliance tool for the compliance tool for communities has come out, and it has like a GIS portion of it that includes like our specific municipality, and it excludes all the sensitive land that doesn't count towards the area. So they basically created these tools to see, is the area large enough? Is it near enough? The train station. So it does all that, and then there's also a series of like a zoning checklist of potential of how this could work. So that's what the compliance model is. And that's, again, just to repeat, that is the highest priority right now, is for me to understand all I need to do for that compliance model to become compliant for the following year, and then with the idea of actually doing that zoning change a year from now. So next fall of 23. So yeah, that's the large update in terms of what's going to be. Oh, here comes Kurt, by the way. In terms of what's going to be the highest priority, or what is the highest priority moving forward. There's obviously a lot of other transition stuff that we'll talk, I guess, a lot later. But that was it. So for the moment, back to you, DM.
Okay. I just want to get Kurt to verbally acknowledge his presence. Hey, Kurt, can you scream out, "I'm Kurt Spring"?
I'm Kurt Spring, present.
Excellent. Thank you. So are there any other updates from any board members?
I just had one thought, a carryover from last week when we discussed the industrial district. And it was something that I was thinking about, but I didn't quite bring myself to mention it. And this is when we were thinking about the size of the buildings. And I was just thinking this past week and wondering whether we could go very tall and have kind of like a glass and steel kind of look, and have kind of a stark juxtaposition, kind of like Copley Square or something like that. And it's just something that I thought about. I didn't bring it up last time, but it was something that I've been thinking about. And then there was one other thought, and this goes way back to when we had Jay Tollerman in. And I just wanted to share that my distinct impression was that he and my read of the conversation was that they're looking for some help, or at least he mentioned homeowner relief quite a bit. And the way I read it was that the builder and developer community is looking for some relief from the planning board. And I think there are probably ways that we can give them relief, but it's certainly something that we need to think about. And I wanted to ask Brian, I know that we have a list of developers, and this kind of also dovetails in with kind of I had agreed to do a piece reaching out to the development community in conjunction with the Historical Commission. And I'm wondering if Brian, I can follow up with you, regarding the list of developers that we have, so we can think about what kind of outreach we might do. And once we solidify our thoughts and vision regarding the industrial district, we might want to reach out to developers specifically, regarding that. So, and before you go, so I was wondering if I could maybe reach out to you and review that list at some point. But those are just my thoughts. And again, I know I had asked for this time. I'll just add another piece. Having listened to Dieb's, my read of it was that we keep it short, and if we have to move on, we have to move on. But I appreciate the opportunity to kind of reflect on last week and bring it forward.
So
that's it.
Yeah. So thank you, Nick. I think we have to be careful in this update section that we aren't. So we can't really have a discussion because it's not on the agenda. The specific items that you have brought up are not on our agenda.
Right.
So we can't actually discuss it. So if you want to make time, let me know ahead of time so I can put it on the agenda, because otherwise
I see.
you are throwing stones into the ocean and the waves
I
will
understand.
dissipate.
Yeah.
And
No,
we don't want them to
that's
dissipate.
certainly not the intent.
No, I understand.
But I do think I'll think of something over the weekend. I'm like, I really want to share that, or I really wish I had brought it up, or this or that.
Well,
so maybe there's some way to we'll figure it out.
Yeah, what you can do is write it down, send it at this point. You should probably just send it to me. We can talk about putting it on the agenda so that there's actually so we can notify people.
I see.
So,
sure.
Yeah, that's the key thing is we need to have it in the agenda so that we not only meet open meeting law, but that actually people who are interested get to tune in.
Sure.
Brian,
well, that's it for me.
okay.
And
so any other, I have one short thing I want to talk about, and then we have to dive into minutes. Anyone else have anything they want to bring up? I will take that as a no. So there was Brian, you know more about this than I, but I'll bring it up. There was a meeting discussing our beloved Section 352 about a week and a half ago. So this was after our last meeting, but before the holidays, where legal came up with a particular interpretation of 352, which I think, sorry, Brian's raising his finger.
355.
355, I apologize. And I'm not going to go into it anymore because, again, it's not on the agenda. But the legal interpretation of 355 has really restricted what people can do on non-compliant lots. And so this is, and it kind of goes against, it's against the run of play, as it were, what the town has been doing for the last long decades in terms of whether you need a special permit or a variance to do particular structures. So I'm hoping to bring legal in to discuss this, but I think it's of enough importance that we will want to address this at the next town meeting to revise the zoning so that well, this is something the planning board will have to discuss, but it has significant impacts. For example, if you want to say build an ADU on a conforming lot, not compliant, conforming. Anyway, so that's all I'll say about that. Just the heads up that this is going to come back. And you may recall we had, when we met with the ZBA a couple months ago, this section of our bylaws was under scrutiny. So
did council come back with a memo, or what was?
No, this is verbal. I believe this was a discussion, and that's one of the things that I want to discuss with council was to have something in writing that it can be distributed to the board so that we can react to it.
What was the meeting? Who was there? I mean, what was that?
Brian, this was on a particular, it was based on a particular property. And
yeah, it was based upon a special permit and whether or not the special permit was supposed to be, or, you know, if that was the correct relief that it needed.
I see.
So
yeah.
So it was an actual thing in front of the building department, I believe, where this arose.
Okay.
So so that's coming up. So why don't we dive into the minutes? And I think we have 4 sets of minutes. Brian, I know there was a correction that came from one of our loyal viewers on one of them. Did that get incorporated?
I did make note of it in my copy of the minutes, so when we get to that, I'll recognize it.
Okay, thank you. So why don't we jump into this one?
So September 6th.
September 6, 2022. Any comments, corrections, etc. on this one?
I just had one quick typo down, Brian, in my comments, I think on Rocky Ledge. There's just an extra word in there, and then I think the spirit of what was said is generally fine. But let's see. Yeah, it says concerns with going with from 1 buildable lot to 3. I think it should just say concern with going from 1 buildable lot to 3. So just one extra word in there. Just that with second.
Yeah, okay, strike the with.
Otherwise, I think it's fine.
Okay. You've got.
That was my only comment.
Okay. Could you make a note of that to Nancy?
Yes.
Thank you. Any other comments on this one?
I have.
Go ahead, Sally, please.
So on page 1, under Mr. Zakali at 1C, the third line down is it says, let's see, identifies the necessary measures required to take. Now I misread it the first time. Okay, it identifies the necessary measures required to take to be compliant with the law. Okay, and then at the end of that sentence, so following on, that in turn will allow the town to apply for the one-stop for growth funds plural. One stop is a clearinghouse kind of a thing, so it would be multiple funds that we would be applying to. Brian, am I right about that? Yes. Okay, good. And then just checking. Oh, let's see. Oh, I have a question on the top of page 2, Mr. Manter's comments. So it's like, let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth line down. It starts with the word "don't anticipate any blasting." And then in parentheses, consider having a written procedure ready in case blasting is needed. I'm curious if that was something that Mr. Manter suggested or told them they needed to do.
Do you want me to answer that?
Brian, idea?
Sure, if you can remember that far back.
Certainly, I don't remember the specifics, but the intent here is that although they don't anticipate blasting, that it'd be good to have a procedure in place in the event that they need to do blasting. That way, if that time does come, they'll be ready to go.
So it would be good. Is that a suggestion or a direction?
It's a suggestion.
Right, suggestion. Okay. Okay, so that was my one question. I don't know that we have to make any changes in the minutes. It was just a question. And then further down, Mr. Manter, the second, on the very last line of your remarks, it says, on the slope of the road, to see if there's any other opportunity to make the slopes more favorable. And I guess I'm just curious, is this the road that is called Rocky Ledge Terrace that you're talking about? Because this is this whole kerfuffle about coming in too steep. No, yes, coming up there's a place where the cars will bump.
Yes, yeah, you're that's correct. So the applicant was proposing to for their proposed road from where the existing road ends to continue the road to a dead end or cul-de-sac, and that I believe that the proposed slope had areas that were 11%, maybe a little greater or so.
That's what I remember.
And so we were just looking to see that the applicant further dive into their analysis to see if there's any opportunities to reduce that 11%.
Okay, so
they may not necessarily be able to meet the specifics intent of the subdivision rules and regulations, but we're looking to see how closely they can, if possible.
The words "the road" refers to Rocky Ledge Terrace and its continuation into the new subdivision.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything that they can necessarily do with the existing road, but it's really geared towards.
I didn't know that. Okay.
It's not. They do not control the existing road.
So it's the new road.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
I would use the word "new." That helps.
Okay.
And
Or
then
proposed road.
I had a question on page 3. Oh, I know. Here it is. Yes. So on page 3, it starts out Ms. Dale, then Mr. Zakali, then Ms. Dale. And in the second Ms. Dale comment, there's a reference to a strong hold. And I believe that what I said was a straw poll.
Yes.
So it would say, but this is a preliminary review and not the final. It was a straw poll, not a binding vote.
I
and
believe
that same correction occurs under Chair Jarius.
Yes.
Second up from the section there, noted that many new homes, et cetera. And then also, when the board provided a straw poll opinion.
I think we can all agree that straw poll is probably a better transliteration of what was said.
Well, it's like my spell checker or my dictation on my phone. And then in section 3, I think TMC is supposed to be MTC.
This is the name of our legal counsel's.
Talman and Costa abbreviated would be MTC, not TMC.
Okay.
And at the very end of that paragraph, I would request that TP be replaced by town planner. And on the very last page, which is page 5, so Mr. Zakali, his paragraph goes on, it's good. And it's referred to as I. I would imagine that the Historical Commission would consider, and I wonder why the existing door cannot be removed. Is it fine to say that I without putting it in quotes? Does it matter? Is it an issue?
Well,
it says Mr. Zakali, so.
Right. So that's a good question. I believe these are.
I think it's probably fine. I shouldn't have brought it up. It seems sort of nitpicky at this point.
I think it's, I don't know what the proper third person is when you're speaking, when you're summarizing what something was said.
Something was said. It would say Mr. Zakali.
Yeah.
But
why don't we just leave it as is? I'm just noticing we've spent 5 minutes on this.
Okay, let me just tell you that there's 2 other corrections on page 5. The first bullet that says missing an existing door to the left. No, on the far left in the elevations, and it says both old and proposed drawings. When we say old, does that mean existing conditions?
Yes.
Okay, so we should change it to
So we
that.
should change that to existing
And
conditions.
under Mr. Leaf, the second sentence suggested the drawings be revised and submitted, and that's all my comments on that one.
Okay. So with those corrections, is there a motion to approve the, Brian, could you scroll to the top? I've already forgotten what the date is. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of September 6, 2022 as amended?
I'm so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please. Kurt?
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
I Ching?
Abstain.
Sally?
Absent.
Aye.
Right. Aye, and Deb says aye as well. So we have a 4-0-1. Thank you. On to the next one, please. And Sally, would you please send your edits to Nancy?
Oh, I will indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're now looking at September 20th, 2022, and let us accelerate through these if possible. Are there any edits on this?
On page 2, this is where we got the email about the correction. It's on the bottom of page 2 in the Mr. Tallerman paragraph.
Okay. You would like to read into the record with the changes?
Instead of the sentence reading, he noted that adding a new nonconformity on a conforming property requires a special permit, the sentence should read, he noted that adding a new conformity on a non-conforming property requires a special permit. And that was the email that we received. Brian?
So what he's noted, so what this is saying that the building commissioner could make the determination if the application was so this sorry, it should say that he noted that adding a new nonconformity on a conforming property just like that requires a variance.
Okay, I didn't see that was what the edit was in the email. Should I try to share screen the email? I don't.
Well, I think the question's arisen what was actually said.
True.
And so maybe what we should do is ask Nancy to go back and revisit that part of the discussion to make sure that what was said is reflected in the wording. And if we come back and we discover that what was said was, well, it's what it was said is what was said. So let's.
So that would be great if Nancy could look at that. On page 3, I started to have all kinds of questions and comments, and I know you're in a rush, and so I don't want to burden down the meeting, but I felt like I needed a real better understanding of all that was talked about in our joint meeting with the ZBA.
So are these questions that would impact the minutes, or are they questions which would make things more clear to you?
For the most part, with one exception, they are things that would make things more clear to me. I only have one correction, which is in topic 2, minor site plan on page 3, minor site plan review versus site plan review, the first bullet under discussion, where the question was asked, do we get rid of the waiver process? And I think she means at a minimum. And instead of waiver process, I wanted to say that it would be section 9.5.1a waiver section of our zoning bylaw.
Okay, that seems reasonable. Yep.
And those are the only questions that I have. I mean, those are the only edits I have, other than, like I said, I really would love to have a better understanding of that whole discussion.
Right. So I think that it's important as we go through looking at these minutes, that if there are questions that arise because of personal clarification, that would be something that we would want to bring up on the agenda so that we can discuss it in full. Because I for instance, we might want to get legal to come back in and discuss that,
Mhm.
if that's so.
I think to some extent that's a really good idea, but sometimes we get the minutes right when we get the agenda. And so you're not supposed to, unless I say, all right, well, let's.
So my point would be, if those questions come up, then write the questions down and let's schedule it for the agenda, because we're really at this point just trying to get these minutes out the door.
Which is great. And I will definitely write my questions down about page 3 of the September 20th minutes. Thank you for suggesting that.
Just as a very quick reminder, you can always email the group or one or all or anyone related to scheduling. So that's one thing that is not against open meeting law. So anyone can, if it's talking about an agenda item or scheduling to when to do something that's related to the planning board, that's totally fair to talk about over email. Just 100% all around scheduling is totally fine. So don't feel that's breaking anything. It's certainly agenda items. That's completely, totally appropriate to, you don't have to email everybody. You could just email the chair, or you could email everybody. You could do that too. It doesn't matter. Scheduling is not related to open meeting law.
Excellent. And then I'm just trying to see if I don't think I had any other actual.
Okay.
Right.
So,
it was just that one.
So let us, so any other amendments from the rest of the board? Seeing none, is there a motion to approve the minutes of September 20th, Oh, we need to bounce this back to Nancy to take a look at that one part.
Right.
So why don't we're going to push this off. We were going to move this to a time uncertain.
Since we're pushing it off, does that help Sally's inquiry at all in terms of time to?
That's.
So
I would say
there's what we talk about in the meeting, and then there's what we talk about after the meeting to clarify what happened in the meeting, and what we talk about afterwards to clarify what happened in the meeting didn't happen in the meeting, and these are the minutes of what happened in the meeting. So
that's why I really approving the minutes should just be focused on, are the minutes a accurate and complete record, and so we should focus on that. And a further elucidation is something that we need to take in another time, because we've only scheduled a few minutes for this, and we're already 15 minutes, and we've only approved one. So let's move on to we're tabling this one in the sense that we're taking it off the table, and let's move this to, let's go on to the next one, please, Brian. I thought we had 3, right?
Yeah, hold on. Let me just get it up.
We lost you. 4.
Yeah,
okay.
It's November 1st is the next one. I'll get it up in just a sec.
Okay. So while Brian's pulling that up, are there any comments on the November 1st one?
I have one spelling correction and one edit. That's it.
Is the edit substantial, or is it just okay? So let us just go straight to the edit. We'll just assume your spelling is correct.
I can give Nancy an email about the spelling. So on page 1 of November 1st, under 1B, last sentence or last phrase, also looking to include Winchester Hospital, I think what you meant to say, and you might have said it this way, or you might have meant it to say, you're also exploring if we can incorporate the existing Winchester Hospital shuttle. Is that what you meant?
Yeah.
Okay, so if we said that, it would make more sense to somebody reading this a year from now or whatever, whoever reads these. Because we're trying to include the whole hospital. We're also exploring if we can incorporate the existing Winchester Hospital shuttle. I think that's what you meant.
Yeah, no, completely. Yep.
Okay, good. And then I'll give Nancy the spelling correction. That's all I have.
Okay. Are there any other edits, please? If not, I'd welcome a motion to approve the minutes of November 1st, 2022 as amended.
So moved.
Is there a second, please?
Second.
Roll call vote, please. Kurt?
Aye.
Nick?
Aye.
I Ching?
Aye.
Sally?
Aye.
I say aye as well. Okay, last one, please. Here we are, November 16th, 2022.
I have only two very minor edits.
Okay,
One on page 2, under potential tree bylaw, and it's the bullet. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6th bullet that starts major tree preservation bylaw involves 3 areas being considered: entire property / construction related, tree review zone, no construction, and entire property, very large trees.
Okay,
Deanne,
actually-
Brian, you're both on that working group. Is that correct?
I would say the entire property was for significant trees.
Significant. Thank you.
So I agree. Entire property with significant trees.
Oh, yes. And then the bullet, 2 bullets below that starts bylaw committee. I think what it should say is the bylaw would create a committee that would.
Yeah, I think that's a good clarification.
Okay, and then on the, I'm sorry, there was 3, not 2, I'm sorry. And then on page 3, the very top bullet, I think let's see, who, was this just general planning board discussion? Oh no, this is all from you, Diab. The top bullet says the development process would include a rigorous public review incorporating feedback. And don't we mean the bylaw development process?
Yes, I think that's a good clarification.
Okay, and that's all I have.
Okay. Any other amendments, ameliorations? Seeing none, would someone please move to approve the minutes of November 16th, 2022 as amended?
So moved.
Is there a
Second.
please? Thank
Second.
you. Thank you, Nick. Roll call vote. Kurt?
Abstain.
Who's next? Nick?
Aye.
I Ching?
Aye.
Sally?
Aye.
And Diab says aye as well. Thank you very much.
That's it.
I believe that is it for minutes for this evening. And we will move on to our next item on our agenda. If I can find my agenda, I could tell you what it is. Where's my agenda? What happened to my agenda?
It's the FY24 budget. We have till 8, not till
Okay,
8.
so let's dive into the FY24 budget. So typically this doesn't require an awful lot of discussion because we don't have an awful lot of money to talk about. But I thought that I would lead with a discussion. When we get into the things we can do something about, I'll talk about something we probably can't do something about, and that is our annual discussion with town management about getting funding for the assistant planner position. So Sally and I met with Beth Rudolph and Mark Toogood, acting and assistant town managers, respectively. Last week, was it last week, Sally? I can't remember anymore. It must have been last week. And one of the
I
things
defer to you.
okay, one of the things we discussed was the issue with having no backup for the town planner. And that we would really like to see an assistant planner come in, and that this has been on the plan for a number of years. And as a matter of fact, the override, which was passed a number of years ago, the last big override, originally had included funding for an assistant town planner, which was lopped off. So I told them that we would once more be asking to fund an assistant town planner. They acknowledged the requests, but said that due to the current financial state of the town, the fact that the town's AAA status is under review by Moody's, because Moody's has changed their algorithm for assigning your status. And so at the time we spoke, no one actually knew what Moody's concerns were. But there is great concern about losing the AAA. And so putting in another FTE in the budget was not something that they would propose. I let them know that we would still continue to be a thorn in their side and keep pushing for this. So that is the part that we have no control over, although we will continue to push for it. And now we come to the part we have control over.
So
least
before we go on to the part we have control over, I just want to, I hate to not beat a dead horse, but beat a horse that keeps getting beaten every year. But is there a way to dollarize the value of having an assistant town planner? And might there be a strategy of putting it in the budget with the understanding that the position might not be filled until halfway through the year, and put that budget amount in?
Thank you, Sally. Yeah, that was a really important contribution you made to the discussion, and I completely forgot about it.
No, it's okay.
So the idea is that we have essentially. I doubt that we're going to be able to get that in time for this budget, because we have to give this to our request within a couple of days, actually.
And so whatever that's, I think it's a grade D or something. I have it right here, but whatever that 50% of a year of a grade D employee or whatever it is, we would put that in the budget and say we anticipate hiring a town planner, and we will attract the best candidates if we can tell them that halfway through the year they will have money to hire an assistant planner to advance the agenda of the department and the board.
So we're going to get right into the sheet and like actually get down, and that's what this meeting is for, is to like look at the Excel sheet and kind of talk about real money in terms of what's going to happen. So sorry.
So pop that up, Brian. So Sally, that is an excellent idea. And I think that the people we have to convince are FinCom.
Yep.
And so I think we have a little bit of time to come up with those arguments, what is to quantify the financial impact of the planner, of an assistant planner. But that will, I think, require some effort by this board to do some research and try to figure out something which has legs in terms of saying what it is that we think we'll get out of a town planner or an assistant town planner.
I think for the purposes of the box that we need to fill out in this spreadsheet that's due in like 36 hours. So where it says permanent, you would increase the fiscal 24 request by 6 months of the pay grade for that job. And I just had it with me a moment ago with the.
So Sally, so that's what this, can you, I don't know how easily you can view these numbers that are in here.
I see it, 76 to 113.
Right. So that is what the position, that's what, that's the grade that it's in. So that's what can be offered in terms of, within that range, based upon how many years of experience you're looking for.
Exactly.
So
and that's for the town planner position.
Correct. And, there's other, and I think what you're talking about here is this professional services one. So we actually do need to go. There's not a lot here. And most of this is kind of, not really a lot of time at all in general. The time here, like you said, is we need to figure out the professional services and whether that's going to be potentially used for several, because right now there's actually no professional services money. It's all been contracted out until June 30th.
What do we have now that we pay form and place with?
That money.
We're out. I want to make a little clarification, Brian. I think Sally is asking to add the 6 months of an assistant town planner in line 1 right there.
Yes,
so that's
gotcha.
6 to 113K plus whatever the range is for the assistant town planner, which is grade D.
I believe it's a D. I have to
Gotcha.
find my paper.
Yeah, it's a D.
Thank you, Dia.
It is a D. Yeah.
So why don't
One quick question as we're talking about this too. Are we confirmed that, or has the decision been made, I guess, by the town planner that we're actively going out in terms of finding Brian's replacement to hire for a town planner as opposed to a planning community development director or like another level within here?
so that's a really good question, and I've my memory is that that position has been removed. So the planning and community development director was the first position that was created, I think, 10 years ago plus, for a joint position. But it was for a position that was jointly supervised by the planning board and the select board. That person left after 6 months, and then the town planner position was created, which was solely under the direction of the planning board. And later we created the assistant town planner position through town meeting. So that position has never been filled after the very first person left, and I believe it was removed. So I've reached out to Human Resources and Peter Kaimetz, head of the Personnel Board, to see whether they have that same recollection or whether I'm wrong. So,
got it. It is, yeah, but it is still in this schedule. That was circulated. Okay,
we think it's a mistake. Yeah, both Diab and I. This was some sleuthing today, so it's happenstance that you brought it up because it was the talk of the day in terms of a weird issue. Anyway, so yeah, we both think it's a mistake in the compensation schedule, is what we think.
Yeah. 38K.
I'm sorry, the mistake being that it was removed?
That it was included.
Oh, okay.
No, so that 38K is
that's 50%.
6 months. That's 60. That's 6 months. That's 6 months.
Yeah. I was going to say starvation wages.
Yeah, no, months. I mean, so
why don't we put 6 months in there just so that some of us recognize that?
So, but what you can offer is between 64. Well, you can ask for between 64. It's huge, actually. It's a very large difference. It's between 64 and 95 is that grade. So it's actually very large difference.
Divided by 2, so that would be 32 to.
Well, I did like 78. I did like a step 9, which was kind of in the middle. So it's a step 9 divided by 2 is what I was doing.
That's how you got to 32, but it could be. Well, I see. That's how you got to 38.
38. So, well, yeah. So
as
I guess
the starting salary.
As the starting. Yep.
Yeah. So let's just to make this more confusing. What if you actually put in the 64 to 98 inside the parentheses, and then just put it divided by 2 after it?
Divided by 2 for half year.
Yeah. So that way we'll know, because we may ask for 60 for this next year, but the year after it's going to be, if we get this, it will be a full year's salary, which people have to understand what that range might be. So
wouldn't that half year be less because it doesn't include any of the benefits and stuff?
No, they'd be full time, but they wouldn't start until
exactly. It's full time. Yeah, exactly. You said
June,
it.
July, August, September, October.
So whatever you've done, Brian, looks really weird.
It's also because it's wrong and I was in the middle and then I started talking and screwed it all up.
Good.
Oh my God, it's a walk and chew gum moment.
ZF emoji. Yeah.
Okay. So
I Ching, was I Ching's question answered?
Oh, okay.
Yes.
It's like watching a ghost write things. It's like a Ouija board.
It's a poltergeist.
Weird things are happening. And if you put another S after assistant, I won't keep thinking astronomer planner. Thank you.
And do you intentionally have a double apostrophe?
And I would put a divide by 2 underneath that.
Poor Brian.
Close paren, divide by 2. Because it is that. Okay, great. Okay, I think we're done with the typing and the really slow update. Okay, so we're done with that. So let's go down to, so our budget for temporary was essentially, that's for Nancy, our recording secretary.
And we were pretty down. It was a very good estimate that we had the last year. It was down to within, I don't know, $50 or $60. That if I remember correctly,
the bottom is cut off.
Well, the second line includes time for a recording secretary for the master plan implementation committee. So,
what lines are you on? What line items are you guys looking at?
Line number 4.
Okay, and that's where who's in there?
That's Nancy,
our recording secretary.
Yeah, that's the recording
great,
secretary.
Great,
yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So I think that. So the question is, so 15. So essentially, we've got $1,200 if we go according to this that we would use for MPIC recording, which is $100 a month, assuming we do one meeting a month.
You're basing that on the fiscal 22 actual?
Yeah, I'm subtracting. We've got 7,700 for FY23 budget, so I'm subtracting those two, and assuming that $1,200 is going to be sufficient for minutes for the MPIC, and I think that's.
I have no way of knowing. How many meetings? How long are they? How many?
It would be one meeting a month.
Oh, so it's right.
So I think it's sufficient. I mean, if we raised it to 8,000, I think it's a big. I'm still a little surprised that our FY22 was as high as it was without MPIC. So I'm guessing that there were some extra meetings along the way that Nancy had to or some having to go back and revisit the tape.
Yeah. Is there any sort of history of ask for 8,000 or ask for 8,100 and have them say no, you could only have 7,000?
Well, typically, I think it's if you do it for a whole bunch of years, if we ask for a certain amount and we never even come close to reaching it, they would just say, don't request that. But
except we have another recording secretary that we're putting into this budget, which is MPIC.
Right. But we had that in last year's budget.
Right.
But
so we asked for 7.
Starting this year.
Yeah, I understood.
I'm just saying, it's a better.
I mean, we could go to 8,000. I think we're fine with. I think we're okay with 7,700.
Yep.
Although we also have to consider that we are going to have. What's it called? The Waterfield project will be coming up, and so there may be. You may recall that 10 Converse. Those of you who were around for 10 Converse, we had a lot of extra meetings, I believe, on that one. So. It's possible we will need more of Nancy's time for that. So maybe going to 8,000 would just be safe.
And you could put the rationale in the narrative if such a thing exists. The rationale being that we are anticipating increased planning board meetings associated with what's it called, the Waterfield, and we're anticipating an additional recording secretary for MPIC, monthly MPIC meetings. Yeah. And those two things would bump it up to 8,000, and they would say, oh, that sounds logical, and approve it.
You're ever the optimist, Sally.
I know, isn't it? Just so obnoxious.
So why don't we go, so if the group is okay with it, why don't we just do 8,000 and leave it at that?
Ryan, do you type up a narrative that goes with this?
Yeah, so this is the this is kind of the part of the year that not only are you looking at the budget, but you're actually also thinking about, you don't have to defend it quite yet, but the money, you kind of have to have roughly an idea, specifically with professional services and with this other stuff, it's not as nearly important. But in terms of what projects, so it's actually kind of a goal setting thing as well as a budgeting thing. So you don't have to figure out all of that, but with the money, yes. But you don't necessarily need to feel like you have to, like you're married to a certain project with that money. But that yes, eventually you will have to. That's the point of going in front of FinCom saying we need this money for this reason. This project, we're going to use it for X. You know.
So,
sorry, Sally, you're muted, Sally.
Go ahead, Diab. Go ahead, Diab.
No, you go ahead. I just had a question which I think I answered already.
So in like, just like you put that plus, or you put a parenthetical phrase on the permanent line, the parenthetical phrase would be a very shorthand reference to what our rationale will be that we present. So it's like, not even just, well, I guess we'll just present it when we do the narrative.
Yeah, I think we can
Good. Okay.
we
Done.
can remember it. I just want to make sure, Brian, and I should know this, that we voted in new compensation plans, and those would presumably affect the salary or the whatever it's called.
These are the ones that came out, the revised one as of yesterday.
Right, and so how much?
Brian.
So we also have to take that into account when we budget for recording secretary, because presumably, hopefully, those rates have gone up to account for cost of living.
A lot of the time, the temporary doesn't, but I will make sure that is the case. But I do not believe that is part of the budgeting, municipal budget.
Yes, I noticed. Yeah, so let's make sure that the salary we pay is commensurate with. I really.
We do have control over those steps, and we can talk about that.
Okay.
Offline, I think I understand the
concern
goal. Yeah.
One quick question. How do you show what the total fiscal request will be down at the bottom of the sheet when you have ranges up above? How do you do that?
We do need to have an actual, we can have it based upon a grade and step. Though I think this one is we would pick the middle. I don't know what the answer to this first one is, and then if
it's based on years of experience.
Right. So it's kind of a weird thing to say, but you basically do need to we need to have you could ask for the whole thing, to be honest, and then if you don't use it, you don't use it. Like that also happens. There's a lot of different ways to play this, but the idea is that we need to come up with a number tonight, or is it more appropriately in 20 minutes or so?
Well, so you never put the top of the range in your offer.
Well, for a budget, you put it, but you don't put it in the offer. I mean, and if they're at a different level than Brian is, then you'd start them out lower.
This is just the range in which you can give an offer to.
So let's just use whatever you're at now, Brian, which I think is at the top level.
It's one off, yeah.
One off. Why don't we let's put in the top level. It's not a big difference, but it allows us to have the flexibility.
So it would be top level for the current planner position, and then top level for the proposed assistant planner position that we would be asking for.
I think that would be. I think that might actually, if we have any hope of getting this through FinCom, I think we need to go for something lower than 92K, because that's a 30K year difference.
I think
Brian, you suggested half.
Yeah.
Well, not necessarily. That was a place to in terms of what you had to play with. It makes sense that if you're putting an assistant under someone, that the I don't know what we would call who's ever above if it's town planner and then assistant town planner, then it makes sense that it would be at the higher end from just because you're managing a person, and that's not really in the job description quite yet.
No, we were talking about the 64 to 92.
So I know we started off with, we're going to go right back to what you wrote, Brian. So Sally and I have been hogging this conversation. Anything from the other members of the board to move this along? Do you want to, shall we just go in the middle like Brian had it now that we've discussed all of this?
Sure,
Okay.
that makes sense.
Okay. So whatever you had in there originally, let's put it back, Brian.
Can you keep that comment as a footnote or just have a separate?
Yeah, put it in a separate column. That way we'll be able to just sum it together. So just, I think you're going to have to turn those into zeros, Brian. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to sum that column.
Oh, yeah, no, this is more of notes, and then I'm going to.
Oh, you'll write it up later. Okay.
Yeah,
cool.
and then like just yeah, so we certainly don't have to do that, but yeah, because these actually numbers need to be exactly to what the compensation schedule says. It's not 76K. It's like it's 76,120. You know, it's a very specific number. So we're not getting into that detail. So I guess I probably shouldn't have said we have to come up with the number. It's more of I will come up with the exact numbers later.
Yeah. We're going to take the top. Go ahead.
Yeah, I've got a question on professional services, and something tells me that we've addressed this, but our budget is 45 and we spent 31.5, and I'm wondering if we're going to spend the rest of it.
We've already contracted it out. It's already done. That was during this year when it was when COVID was more prevalent in terms of what we were doing for just work.
Is FY is it the calendar year?
So no, it's the fiscal year. So it's the FY22 is from July 1st of 21 through June 30th of 22.
Okay, but I guess my question is why is the actual doesn't reflect the fact that we spent the rest of the money?
Because that was the previous fiscal year. Right now we are in FY23 at the moment, 45, and we have already contracted out 45, and I guarantee you that 45 will already be spent because we have contracted it out.
Okay. So in the previous year we underspent is what I'm asking.
Exactly. It was one of the few years ever that we've underspent. Yes.
Okay. So let's put a what is the word? I don't know. We're done with personal services. Brian, you're just going to make a note for the temporary services that we're going to look at cost of living on that one. So we can skip on to I think Nick, you are prescient in moving directly to professional services, because I really don't think there's anything in those other ones that we really need to worry about. Let's just keep them as they are.
It's possible. I have not used. I'll be honest, and because I have to be right here, that we've rarely used our computer supplies because the IT, but a lot of the stuff comes out of the IT budget. Mm-hmm. It's possible the computer supplies, based upon, especially if you're asking for an assistant planner, that you might want to up that for the following year, just because you're going to have 2 new hires. Is the hope, or that's at least what you're planning for in the budget. So I would recommend, and for that reason, basically maybe more like 750 instead of 500, just to beef it up a little bit more.
So why don't we split it into 500 plus 250? So if they don't give us the assistant, we still get 500.
So Brian, if you don't use it because IT provides it, what are you suggesting that this is used for? computer supply?
Well, because this is a new hire, it's more of kind of covering that base so that they can at least get something that makes, something that works and makes sense for them in terms of a laptop. I'm not talking about anything else other than, a laptop. And then, but there are a lot of, well, not a lot, but it's kind of like weird adapters for projectors that you end up using. That it's just like a lot of that type of stuff. Not a,
Yeah.
but in general, not a lot, and that's why most of it, like I said, comes out of the IT budget. But the IT budget is always, it'd be nice to at least soften that blow for the IT budget.
Yeah.
I guess.
So the IT department doesn't provide a laptop?
Yeah.
Oh.
Well,
Yeah, they must provide a laptop because this budget wouldn't cover the cost of a laptop.
No. Well, so they get different rate. They certainly get different rates. But and when they buy it at such bulk for the town. So yeah.
I could see, and I don't know if this works, computer supplies also, if there's some sort of cloud-based software that we wanted to get a subscription to or something like that, that might come out of this.
Yeah, most of his money is licenses.
Yeah. But if there's something particular that we would want, which isn't in the standard sort of menu that he has available from wherever he gets the software from. So I think this is.
I have one other question.
I would leave those other items. I mean, even if there are variances,
they're pretty tiny.
It's consistent, and I say we just go ahead with the small amounts the way they are.
Yeah.
Unless you want to.
Yeah. Let's just. Yeah. I mean, these are really tiny. We're the elephant in the room is waiting for us. So let's pay for the peanuts.
I would say maybe let's not overthink it.
Yeah. So remind me to tell you about bike shedding. Next time, let's go down to advertise. Okay, Sally.
So one thing I want to ask about has to do with the Communication Study Committee recommendations. And I know they're not going to give fiscal impact report to town meeting until I guess maybe this coming spring or next fall. I'm not sure. But in the meantime, I know that we want to have some improvements done to our planning board page. And should we put under professional services some nominal number to pay a communications professional to at least execute some of the recommendations that the planning board would come up with for, things to add to the planning board page as an interim, waiting for the Communication Study Committee's major fiscal report.
Sure. Can we put $2,000 in under advertising and then move directly into that?
I would think that's advertising.
Thank you. I like that idea.
So is $2,000 sufficient? And so we're going to hire someone. I don't know what it costs to hire someone to do the issue with hiring someone is they have to get access to an internal system to do the changes. So that's something that we need to figure out. But I think we should budget for it. And I don't know if that $2,000 is sufficient.
If you want to use a high school kid, it might work. But given the confidentiality issues you just noted, I would say it's not enough money.
I really
sorry. Hold on a sec. That line item, advertising, that is not how that money could be used. It could not be used to hire someone for a website. That would be under professional services.
Okay, so 2,000. I
thought you were just
things
talking
in
about
newspapers.
Yes, exactly. So advertising is when maybe it's not a special permit. Maybe there's a building permit, like a by right, building permit in the center business district. The planning board can choose to make that a public hearing, and then the planning board would eat that cost because
right. So these are required public notices.
Yes, or advertising for a specific event, a housing forum or something that
which we have coming up.
Right. So there's, we certainly, I wish
we
I
have
had.
8 minutes to finish this, by the way, folks.
Okay. So why don't we keep the 2,000? Then here, this 45,000.
So we want to hire, I think we need to hire someone to do our website. And I would recommend that we get someone, not a high school student, but someone who can jump in and whatever. As much as I admire high school students, we need someone who has experience so they can just do it. 5,000 is a lot for website design.
Oh,
I don't
that's
think
what
it
you
should say
said.
design. It should just say web page update.
Sorry, I thought that's what you had said.
No, I might have said that, but
I
I
thought
don't.
2,000 was too little. 5,000 might be a lot. I don't know. We don't have, so here's the problem. We don't have time to figure out what the rate would be. So why don't we put in 5K with the knowledge we don't actually know how much it'll cost because we haven't actually written out the scope of work for it.
Just say improvements, web page improvements.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to call it the website anyway in my notes. So we got 5K for website. So then we have, so what are this is where we get into the meat of it. What are the major projects that we envision coming up? We're going to be done with the form in place by the end of by the fiscal year 23. We should have the recommendations for form in place on zoning as well as design. That was the idea, was that we would have that done. That's where our 15K is going to for the rest of their work.
30. That's actually 30 for form in place.
Yeah, but we already paid them 15.
Correct. Or nearly, yes. Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, so we only have another 15 to go. So we will have to do something similar to form in place, possibly for the light industrial district for Holton, Swanton Cross. It may not need to be as detailed because I think there's not as much streetscape there to work with. But we'll still need some monies for that, and I would suggest we do like 15 to 20K for that project. So this would be phase 2 of Holton Swanton Cross. Does that sound reasonable?
I thought what we paid for form in place is very stretched. Like I felt like it was not very much money. So I wonder if we could just ask for more. I felt almost embarrassed at how much work they were.
Are you saying we should give more money to form in place?
I know, just for the service in general, for anybody who's providing that service. I think it's really a lot. So I wonder if we can ask for more, not specifically for form in place, but for this project, this IL project.
Okay. So instead of 20 grand for the second phase, I
had 25, 30, whatever, okay. It's like, let's shoot high so that they can.
Would you just say, leave it constant? I mean, that would be an ask, but it would be consistent with prior periods. And then you're really asking, you're really reaching.
We do kind of have to account for it. So if we get to 45K at a minimum, I'm happy. But right now, I agree with Yi Ching that more money would be better to get for Holton. So let's do Holton at 30K. Now, what other projects are we going to start working on where we need consultants? So I think we always want to have around 10K in hand as
contingency.
Contingency, thank you.
And then my question is, as we're looking at changes to the table of uses, well, I guess that could come under the form in place budget, whether that's going to cost us any consulting money. Will the 3A submittal or 3A, ongoing 3A compliance cost us any consulting money? Will the working out the legal aspects of the 3.5.5 policy cost us any money? And I think those were all the ones oh, well, the ADU forms and rules and regs cost us any money?
The answer to all three of those is no.
Okay.
No money, no extra money there.
Good.
Sorry, and did you guys? And so I apologize. I was just putting kids to bed. But did you cover on like both the North Main Street corridor and Holden and Swanson, like the actual like drafting of zoning changes, like the actual drafting of the language that we propose to change? Because Foreign Place isn't doing that, right? I mean, we're going to need legal to do that for us, presumably.
Yeah, that's I believe that would be covered under their contract. They have they kind of have it's a flat fee contract, I think.
I thought they
the legal
said
contract
it was an either or, that the amount of money, and to your I Ching's point, that the amount of money that they agreed to do this was for, I don't know why I have this memory, but it was either to come up with design guidelines or to help us craft zoning language. I Ching,
yeah. Yeah, well, they certainly can't do. They certainly can't do that with this. Yeah, with 30,000 plus doing all the test fits that they've done.
Right. We have about 2 more meetings with them, right? And I think that we're expecting a more complete picture of what than what they have offered. I just don't think that in 2 meetings we're going to get the graphics and the PR package that we can use to persuade the town to okay this zoning change. You know, I just think that there will be a lot more work ahead of us for Foreign Place to get it to the place where town meeting can look at it and make a determination.
So does that make it like a ongoing phase of North Main Street? Corridor?
I think there would be a lot more work, yeah.
Ongoing consulting for ongoing North Main Street corridor revitalization.
So yeah, so I would to answer somebody's question about. So I expect that when we get to the drafting stage for the zoning, that we will not. That's no longer Foreman Place's job to do that. That falls squarely into. We will be working. We will essentially create the policy that we want, and then we would go to legal, which would draft the language to meet that policy. So Foreman Place may say you should consider, allowing, expanding, I don't know, be able to incorporate parcels back in these areas, or you should. So they're going to come up with suggestions on what we can do physically, and then we will work with legal to create the zoning, which would actually make that possible. So yeah. I really see Foreman Place really in terms of creating a higher level view of these things, so that we they give us the framework and then we fill it in.
Yeah, but Deb, like one of the reasons why we hired them in the first place was their ability to graphically depict ideas. Yeah. So, once we get legal to get the wording, say, and we have this idea, like to communicate those ideas, say 3 versus 4 stories to the town, I think will be some kind of work from somebody like Foreman Place to
okay.
Because like I've seen it in like zoning bylaws or form-based codes where the graphics are integral to understanding what's going on, right? And I don't think legal can do that.
I think that's a really So it comes to rules and design. It's the design rules and the zoning rules.
I misunderstood what you said, I Ching. I now belatedly agree with you completely. So what you're saying is that we should add money into the budget to provide that sort of supplementary information that goes along with the zoning, using their expertise at visualization and
it might not even be supplementary. I almost feel like legal supplementary to what they're sort of graphically depicting. This is what we are hoping for.
So why don't we call this phase 3 of North Main Street. And this would be something which I'm not sure how we're actually going to define it in words. I think I kind of get the
Phase three
envelope.
of, I think we could say phase 3 of North Main Street is to take the final test fits that Foreman Place will have presented, that we will have chosen, and to turn them both into visuals that we will pair with policy statements that we will ask legal to turn into bylaws with visuals, the diagrams like you see in the Newton zoning bylaw, for instance. And the money would also allow Foreman Place to create compelling graphics to communicate our vision and our policy, the basis for our policies and our design requirements.
Okay.
And that's what the money would pay for, I Ching? Does that sound right?
Yeah. Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
So that sounds excellent. And I'm so glad we're recording this because I can't write that fast. So what is it that we're looking for? Are we looking for another 10 grand?
Yeah, at least, if not 15.
I was going to say 30.
Yeah.
Well, 30's we're getting kind of big here. So because we've got to justify a 100% increase in our budget. So right now, if we do 15K, we're already we're at 55. So the question is, what other projects do we? So we do have, we've got the MBTA zoning, but we can do that either next fall or the following spring. We have to get it all done by the end of 2024.
Well, so some of that could that 20,000, some of that could be towards because it is a large part of the MBTA overlay zoning district is the GBD 2 and 3. So there's, this money could definitely go towards 3A projects.
Well, if you bump it to 25 and say it's phase 3 North Main Street and 5 and GBD 2 section 3A changes.
I would just call those out as two separate things because I think that I know they're kind of the same, but the section 3A also does say something about, well, I don't know if we have to do anything in the CBD, but if we're going to, why don't we just say 5K for section 3A, 20K for phase 3 North Main Street. What other projects are we going to do? I don't know yet.
There's Washington Swanton, but we are not the permit granting authority.
Yeah, we don't have to do anything on that. Brian, you need to add in 10K for contingency. So we are at 40, 50, 60, 70K.
So I think part of the case making for this is that, I know there's
60. Oh, 70.
Yeah, I get 70. Do you get 60?
No, I got 72. You're right.
Okay.
70.
I mean, I don't know how to say this to town meeting and to the FinCom and the town manager, that the demands on the planning board are sort of commensurate with all of the pressures facing communities in the greater Boston area, with housing and growth and development. And this is not a status thing, status quo. This is we really need to up the capacity of this town to address the future.
Yeah, I think that's an argument we'll develop, or at least address. I mean, I'm just right now, just to make sure that we're okay with, are we shortchanging ourselves? I don't think we're shortchanging ourselves. This is a significant raise in what we've asked for before. I think that part of it is, to be honest, I don't know if this is sufficient considering that we know that inflation has hit everyone. And I don't know whether this 70K is worth 70K in fiscal year 2022 dollars. So I don't even know how to ask that question.
I mean, that's given, what are we in an 8% inflationary environment? You could make the case to the FinCom that it's these numbers times 108% is what we're really asking for.
I think the big numbers there in professional services are something that I don't think we've asked before as much, right? In that we're really focusing on the economic development, the business environment of the town, which is that the town really needs this economic base, this tax base from businesses. That's really crucial. So I think those two parts are going to, boost it a lot.
So one thing is that what the manager did was instead of, or the acting town manager at the time, which is still the same one at the moment, but they didn't approve the assistant planner, but they gave us, they upped the professional services money in response. So that was like, so there is, just so you know, that is at play potentially.
No, thank you for reminding us, Brian. I'd forgotten. So we got an extra 15K because they didn't give us the assistant planner. So we're going to ask for an extra 100K because they didn't give us the assistant planner this time.
Brian, can you just come up with a number that would go on line or in cell 3G of the spreadsheet so we can see the total number at the bottom?
Yeah, I can get an exact in a minute if you want to. I don't know or we could go on to something else and I could focus on that for a minute.
Yeah, because we are now.
I know our timing is horrible at the moment, to be honest.
Yeah, we need to dive into form and place. I think we're sufficient for this budget. I think that whatever number Brian comes up with, unless anyone sees that we are under requesting or over requesting, I think our budget is pretty much set. And the exact number is going to be about, it's going to be about 90,000 more than last time. Again, I guess one final question to get those numbers is the number that I was going to use was actually the midpoint of each of the grades for those. Right. Okay. All right. No, we're going to use the upper end for the town planner, 113K.
Oh, sorry. So that's step 17, and then middle
would be whatever you had before, which was
no for the assistant. Then for the assistant town planner, it was like right.
You had 38. Does that?
Right, yeah, and that was based upon step 7. Okay, all right.
So it would be 113 plus 38.
Yeah.
But I'm going to get the exact number here.
Yeah. So I think we're looking. I was wrong. I don't think we're asking for 90K more. I think we're asking for maybe 60 or 70K more. But that's what it is.
Well, and I think it is important that we make the case making compelling, and we'll work on that.
Yeah. I don't think this is unreasonable. It's
especially because we're losing our planner. I mean, professional service. We're losing professional services.
Yeah,
a real big one. So
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think we can put this to rest for the moment.
Yeah.
And then let us move on to form and place. So what is it that we're doing tonight? I think tonight we have reactions to form and place's presentation, and we also have to come up with they're waiting on us to give them directions as to what to do next. And
Brian, you said you were going to email us that presentation. Can you still do that so that we could play around with it as we're talking?
Or have it up on the screen also.
Yeah, I actually I got that somewhere, so I don't know how I got it.
I got it. I think it was sent to us by Suzanne Gill as a separate packet entry because it wasn't received in time to go into the packet for that meeting on October 11th. So she sent it after October 11th, as soon as Form in Place gave Brian their copy.
Yeah.
Because
In
I
any
have one.
case,
I have one that I got that way. I can find the email from Suzanne. Hold on.
Brian sent one on October 12th.
Okay, is that it?
Right?
it should be, because I think they presented on the 11th.
That,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
Awesome.
so that's the one.
I
So
can get
that's
that
the
out.
one to download onto
So
each of our computers.
yeah, it's
It should have been in the email.
I will get that up. Just so you know, we'd always hovered around a total planning board budget of, personal service of everything, right around 150, and this budget would be kind of right around 180.
Huh? Only 30K more? That doesn't make
Wait,
sense.
yeah, wait a minute. I might not have gotten everything there.
Yeah.
No, that's
Okay. So while Brian is figuring out his numbers,
got some problems, clearly.
so
Oh,
why
I see
don't
what it
we why don't you pop up that thing, maybe,
Okay.
or one of us can pop it up. I can't.
You can't. Here, let me give you control at the moment.
Nope.
I'm going back to the meeting. I'm being
Okay.
There we go.
Should be
Okay. Let me make sure I have it on screen. We do. Where the heck did Zoom go? Okay, I've lost Zoom. Hold on a second. There it is. Let me try that again. Okay. Do you see?
Yes.
Okay. So, why don't we shall we go straight to the test fits? How do we want to organize this discussion?
I think there's two goals here. I think one is not one is seeing if what if you feel that you can actually use what's given here in these test fits to start writing, or at least getting bare bones of some type of design guidelines that we could be working with legal on. So it's like, do you feel that you are able to do that? And then number two is, like Diab said, of kind of giving Form in Place a more direction on terms of how they should be spending their time, considering that I think they've actually done, even though they only billed us for half, it looks like like I Ching said, it looks like they kind of were maybe generous and gave a lot, put a little bit more time and effort into that front end, but maybe only billed us half. So I think we have to actually take that into consideration for the amount of work they have actually put into this. So maybe what I'm trying to say is that I don't think that we can expect legitimately to get this many for the same amount of time and effort that they can actually provide. So I just want to make that clear, and that's my personal opinion. I think I Ching agrees. I just don't think it's realistic. I think it's the amount of hours that it took to do what just we're going to be going through here does not equal the invoice. Not that they're playing funny business in any way, but the fact that I think they want to keep working with us and they're trying to make it work. I think that we just can't accept the same level of detail for this.
Unless we decide that we want to essentially extend the contract
You could do no, you could do that. This is just so right now we have about half of this contract of 15,000 that's through June 30th. It cannot extend beyond June 30th of next year. That's
Right.
it.
But
Yeah.
we could say, let's take the rest of the 15K and do something similar for one more test. Do you think, for instance, that the 15K, I'm sorry.
I think you take what they did on this one and then you do it in another intersection, another key intersection that we want to look at to determine what potential design guidelines could be written based upon what's physically possible there. That's the goal here in general for the zoning. But they basically, in my opinion, they would be able to do what they did in terms of a scope this large with not enough detail, or a smaller scope with the same amount of detail.
Okay.
So I think that's the choice. That's the choice that you need to. That's one choice. That's definitely a very clear question that the board should make. Is that would you rather it cover kind of the same geographical area around an intersection, and it be not as detailed, or have it again have it this detailed, but it probably would be over a smaller scope, smaller project site for this.
So the question that I have is starting from the end product. So what is the end product we would like to see? How much will it cost to generate that end product? And how much leftover money do we have to apply to another test fit? If it turns out, for instance, that the product we want out of them at the end, which would be some sort of a document which fills out all of these things, will cost them 15 grand to produce, then we won't be able to do another test fit. And so if it costs them 10 grand to do, then we'll be able to maybe do a small test fit. So
see, I almost wonder if Brian's question is a good question to pose. And I could say that I would love to see them visualize all of North Main Street, 1 mile up and 1 mile back, in some level of generality, like a massing study. And I would like that to dovetail, I guess is the word, with the number of units that we're hoping to add, which is 1,220, if I'm not mistaken. And so how would they visualize?
Where do you have that number, Sally? What?
Brian, help me out with that.
So that's the number of units. We don't have to build that. We just have to zone for that, which technically we.
Oh, so we're talking about 3A now.
Yeah.
And don't forget that the town center can accommodate a lot of units.
Right. So doing the math and saying, okay, well, so of the 1,220, we're going to put 610 south of the Stop and Shop, right? And then you go GBD2, and then you go GBD3, and GBD2, you have formula percentages of how many can be within a half a mile, which takes us up to, help me out, is it not Canal? Clark,
Well,
it's right there.
It's Clark.
Right.
So,
Yeah,
Clark.
50.
And then doing this to Brian's example of, do you want to see a small area in great detail, or a larger area and a more broad brush analysis? I want to take advantage of their visualizing and their massing understanding of how you can put units into attractive buildings of different sizes, and show that going all the way up and all the way back on both sides.
So so far they have visualization. So you're talking about street level visualization?
I believe so. Or
okay. That they haven't provided that for us. I'm worrying about scope creep and detail creep here, just because if it costs us, let's just say it costs us 15K to do the test fits on that they gave us, 15 to 10K. There are at least, I see North Main Street as essentially 3 connected chunks, right? stuff north of Swanton, the stuff south of Clark, and the stuff in between. They're three separate things. So if we're going to do the same level of deep dive without visualizations as you're describing, then we're talking, 45K for the whole stretch plus visualizations. And I don't think we have the budget for that. And that's so
I guess my wish list, my aspirational description of what we would get next is based on, I'm just trying to understand when a town, a planning board, and eventually its engineering department and everybody else takes on a corridor revitalization. At this point in the process, what is the helpful thing they do next?
So where we are in this process is that they've come up with what's potentially physically possible based upon a couple of intersections. So that's what these test fits are potential new intersections. And the goal here of all of this right now, in terms of why we're here tonight, is to kind of figure out a couple of things. But one is that when I think the answer is probably not, is that are we ready to start talking about trying to glean specific design guidelines from these test fits? So that's us discussing about looking at other types of design guidelines, either in the center business district or in other different cities and towns, but really trying to see, like, well, if this is the type of vision that we want to see, what are the words that are going to be used in the design guidelines to make that vision possible? So that's the goal here. That is to come up with, like Dieb said, is that the actual zoning language is probably going to rely more heavily on legal. But what they can do is give us possible visions, and then we get to pick, like a buffet, get to pick and choose what parts of this vision do we want to adapt towards a potential design guideline or for the area. So I think of it more of like that, of like kind of like a buffet. Of getting to be able to pick and choose out of these portions of these test fits what could work in that area.
I have this feeling of optionitis here. Like there is way too many things in front of us, and possibly that all of us need a graduate course on urban planning. Something is missing in terms of how we get there. And with this professional service with them here, I feel like I don't, and I've had graduate courses in urban planning, like I don't understand where we need to go in order to get to this place. So I looked at Somerville, say, Union Square, and the stuff that they've done. Like that was like 8 years of planning. And then I think, from my understanding, is that the city actually did eminent domain and actually, partnered with developers to do all of that stuff. So with this, all these test fits, it's like, sure, these could be options. We could make the streetscape really strong. We could push the parking to the back, encourage green space. But like they said, the zoning hadn't, they did all of this within the existing zoning. So I just don't understand how we would be able to make that first point, which is make the framework to encourage developers to do this. There's something really critically missing here, and I just, because this is within the rights of existing zoning, and I think my point that I got from last time we talked to them was that we focus on the streets. We make the streets a lot more multimodal, and maybe if you're going to develop this part, then you push the stuff to the front. You encourage the streetscapes. You reduce the curb cuts. But then what? I'm not really sure where the missing part is.
Well, that's always my question. How do you encourage and even make possible the aggregation of lots, if that's the word that I'm looking for. I always wondered how you do that.
That's by market. You know, like it's a market thing. It's a business deal.
So, it goes back to that flip comment that I made like 6 months ago. If you build it, if we build it, they will come. If we create, and I don't know if it's flip or it's real, but if we make a really beautiful streetscape and we've got really, what do I want to say, encouraging zoning and design guidelines, will that do it?
So I don't know. I actually don't know if everything they discussed is possible within current zoning. Certainly, I think that a bunch of it is, but some of it isn't. Like the purely residential, obviously, we can't do that. But with Section 3A, we would. So I don't know where we go to answer that question. It's not something I think that Form in Place can provide us. We still have to start with some sort of a framework, which is, I think, what they've given us. I wonder if what I see is actually two parallel things that can go on. One is that we wrestle with this dilemma and look at the options given us for South North Main Street, or whatever we're calling this.
Lower North Main Street, yeah.
Lower North Main Street. And we wrestle with that as a board, but we say Form in Place, give us something similar for the rest of the corridor so that we can work in parallel. Because
and one thing, they gave us 3 options for each of the aggregated properties, and maybe we need to, as a board, discuss the visuals that they provided. Because like if you go to like page 20, for instance, that's parcel 4 concept 3, and they gave us a bunch of those, right? So that we as a board would, and it might be that we do this as a joint meeting with the design review committee and give them a really solid grounding in what we're talking about, and then participate with them in a discussion of the relative merits of option 1, option 2, option 3 for what they already gave us. Figure out from that, what do we think we want them to come back with for the rest of the street? It doesn't have to be 3 options. It could be a initially chosen direction. I just made that up. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, so I think I like that idea. I think that there is an underlying question of what we want out of a change in zoning. I mean, this goes back to our does design come first, or does what elements do we want to be? So the zoning doesn't give us the design, but if we say we want a density of this much, let me page through here to where is the density? So let's go to one of these studies. So here we have a density of 88 units per acre. Here it's 110. I mean, what we decide is an appropriate density will, I think, be fundamental to what the design's going to look like.
That's exactly what I was talking about. Going through concepts 1, 2, and 3 for each of the parcels, coming up with a board consensus, and perhaps doing it in conjunction with the design review committee. One thing I don't know, I know we have inclusive zoning laws in our town, so anything over 6 units has to have 1 unit of affordable housing, which is 10%. Separate from 3A, but it's still a relevant consideration. So you put all those in the mix.
Yeah, no, I was thinking, I guess I didn't completely understand your concept. I was thinking the board would do this before we went to design review, not in conjunction with them.
Well, we could also do it in conjunction with the Housing Partnership Board because they would say, you know, this is how many units we're supposed to create in this town to reach safe harbor and to
No.
reach and attain and
But
sustain.
we know that that's 40
Right.
units a year.
So
I mean,
then
it's,
what massing of density in what locations up North Main Street get us how far towards that goal, knowing that North Main Street is not the panacea, but it can
Right.
be part of the picture.
that's completely within our wheelhouse, though. That's the buck on that stops with the planning board.
Right. I think that it can hurt to have the design review, you know, part of the process. I know that we've had that conversation in other meetings,
Mhm.
and they certainly would like it.
Yeah, no, it has to be part. It definitely
They
has
have to be part. It's a question of when do we bring them in. If we bring them in before we've decided on our density, then it's kind of a waste of their time because they're going to, as I Ching pointed out, we have optionitis here. We're going to say, what do you think of this, or what do you think of that? And they're going to say, why don't you tell us what you underlying want, and then we can help you with the design, rather than giving us three options knowing that only one of them is going to survive.
So I'm coming out of that, Diab, with an idea that we would have an upcoming planning board meeting where we take a deep dive on each of the concepts for each of the parcels in this
No.
initial thing.
Oh no, Sally, that would take
No?
way too long. No.
Or a comparison of each of the concepts for each parcel and say, this parcel seems like it would be good to do concept 2. This parcel seems like it would be good to do concept 4. You can't, that's not a feasible thing.
It seems like we would just go around in circles. No. I think that what some of these things are, I mean, could this be a PUD model similar to, say, in the central business district, right? So like if you do mixed use, we want mixed use, say, we want housing, we want, you know, up to 10% inclusionary housing. We want, you know, hidden parking. And if you do all of that, you can increase your, you know, FAR by X.
I don't want to talk about it as FAR. I want to talk about it as number of units. I don't want this to be a discussion about FAR.
So very quickly, so how I Ching, you had asked a question of like, you know, where's the incentive? How does this work? And you just kind of answered your question, which is basically, so 15 units per acre, which is what's required by Section 3A. It's actually not very much, and ours is higher than that right now, right? We know that, but there's a lot of people saying, you know, trying to dump density there. It's like it's already denser than that. So the idea is that if you do 15 units per acre by right, which is what we have to do, then if you want to go higher than that, you guys like, well, then, you know, it has you have to have a lot that's whatever. In this case, it's 2.5 acres. It probably wouldn't be that, but let's say it's 1 acre or 1.5 acres or something along those lines, and then you have to follow all of these design guidelines. But then, yeah, you have a much higher density. It's just, you know, it's called a density bonus. I mean, that's simply, and it's simply how it's going to work. That's how it's all going to work.
That's the incentive.
That's how the zoning will work in, you know, a year from now. It's going to be an overlay of what's lower than what's now, just to be compliant, and then basically say, okay, if you want the bare minimum, you can do that bare minimum in terms of density. There's still design guidelines, but however, we can't really force a ridiculous amount on these by right projects. They're just not. But it's like, if you basically say that you can get a lot higher density if you do follow these guidelines, and you can go through like a PUD. That's exactly how this is going to get sold.
So I want to go back, and this is actually before my time on the board, and Brian, you were there. When the design of downtown came through, that was the work of essentially Dennis Carlone, right?
He did a large portion of that. It was basically a similar situation in terms of it was kind of test fits that he did on a number of key locations. But it was him and actually two other firms that answered the RFP that the planning board was looking at, and they ended up going forward with Dennis Carlone, who ended up doing the design guidelines for the Center Business District and several other projects in town.
But the idea of the PUD and the actual specification of the areas and the density that came out of Dennis.
Dennis and and he did work with a couple other people, but yes, yeah. Dennis Carlone, and yeah, based on actual what's possible. Yeah.
So this, so I think I'm wondering whether if we take that model, that provides us with an answer to I Ching's question of how do we move from these test fits to something that's we can work with, I guess. And maybe, so if we take that model and we not replace, but we say form in place has the same role as Dennis, that what we are then saying is that this phase 3, which we discussed, is actually partly, maybe there's phase 3 and phase 4. And what phase 3 is taking these test fits with the input of the board and helping us formulate the particular things like the PUD and the design guidelines that go into that, which give us that map that we see of the CBD, which we can then write zoning to.
That feels really clear to me. And I would love to hear from Kurt if you followed that conversation just these past couple minutes. Kurt, like what you see as a developer or investor in property like that, what in the PUD example from the CBD, is this sort of the direction that one would use in order to incentivize people to start developing in the way that we want?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I thought you were going in a different direction of what you're asking me, which is like I think I'm like not in like my developer investor hat, but just like my town planner hat. Like what you said, I Ching, like what kickstarted this conversation resonated with me completely. It's like we're just like I'm not clear to how you get to like the written document that actually like spells out the guidelines for like how we're meant to proceed and encourage the development. And that seemed to me what was missing in the conversation. So not to be repetitive, I think the conversation that we just had was really productive. And I think that should be, I think what you just said is really positive too. I think we're trying to get not just like to like this like imaging phase, like we're actually trying to get to written words that we can actually like bring to town meeting, get put in place that will actually encourage the kind of development that we think the town wants and needs. And that's the piece that I guess, also wasn't clear to me how it fit into what we've been talking about in terms of the proposal. I think in terms of like, I'd want to think a little bit more, I guess, about I Ching your question on, what is the right incentive to investors and, developers to try and encourage them to do what we're talking about. But I think providing a like clear roadmap that opens up the doors to, increase density and development is what's going to attract, I think, investment to these areas. And I think we saw that with Converse Place, right? They were so fixated on maxing out the FAR. Sally, I know you don't want me to say FAR, but that's a clear example of like they saw an opportunity, and the opportunity and the way they're going to make money is by maximizing the density on that site. And so they pursued it. And I think being thoughtful about the amount of density we want here and creating that roadmap and that pathway to getting it is going to be what I think attracts investment to this area.
Did you think that what exists now in the CBD, the PUD guidelines, was that a successful way of doing it from a developer hat? Have you seen other documents like that, and were they different?
So I definitely, I have to admit, full disclosure, like we don't do like in my professional life, like we don't do a lot of development. So, and largely because admittedly, we don't like the risk associated with this process, with the fact that like you're going in front of local boards and trying to get consent for things. And it always takes 2 or 3 times as long as you think it's going to take, and you inevitably don't get what you want. So we tend to shy away from that risk, but I think trying to anticipate what a developer is going to do and what they're going to try and ask for and try and just like make it clear in whatever we codify, I think is going to help make our lives easier, and also help make developers understand very clearly what is okay and what's going to pass and what's not. And I think leaving, trying to, again, make it as clear and articulate as possible is just going to prevent ambiguity and help get us to the outcome we're looking for. And I think what's going to ultimately be, I think what falls on us is like whether or not when we get to that point, if like what we've created is like something that is like attractive to a developer and like can actually generate, an appropriate return for the investment that we want them to put in.
So,
Well, Dave, I wanted to respond to one question that I Ching asked.
yeah, go ahead.
I Ching, you were asking the question whether the whole PUD conceptual structure for CBD worked well for Winchester, and I think that it partially worked because PUD is, if I'm not mistaken, stands for a planned unified development.
I think it's unit, right?
It's a planned unit development in a community of different types of homes. It may include condominiums, commercial property, and single-family homes.
Okay.
Most often, the predominant type of the PUD is a single-family home.
Really, single family.
According to the Laney and Norton LLP.
It's unit. It is unit. Planned unit.
What I was going to say about that is that lot aggregation. I was thinking that lot aggregation was a critical element of the entire concept of PUD, and lot aggregation only worked on one of the 3 PUDs in the center business district, which is where they aggregated lots at the hardware store. There was no lot aggregation at Converse, and there was no lot aggregation at Waterfield.
Sally, there is no lot aggregation for Fells Hardware.
Oh, they owned both of those lots?
That's a single lot.
Yeah,
Oh,
okay,
I guess, yes. Yeah, they own both of those lots.
Right. There was little or no lot aggregation, but because I thought the U stood for unified, I thought aggregation was central to the concept. If it's not, then I don't know how to answer the question, did the PUD concept serve us well?
Well, I think that, yeah, I mean, we've actually only had one real, so the Fells Hardware was not I don't believe it was that a PUD, Brian?
No, it was just a regular special permit.
Yeah, so the only PUD we've seen is the one at 10 Converse, and so we still have a few other PUDs which are still lying fallow, as it were. So
where are they? I didn't know that.
They're up on the other side of Main Street.
The largest, the largest area of the PUD is on the east side of Main Street, north of the Rotary. So that's by far the largest area.
Oh, I see. Right.
Yeah.
Going all the way from the Rotary to Stop and Shop?
Yeah, it's
So,
only
that's
on
right.
the side with the
That's
three gas
So
stations.
I think that the key point here is not whether we want a PUD or not, because I think, and pardon me for speaking with everyone, I don't know that we have enough understanding of everything, that's all of the different vehicles we could use. The key is to recognize that we're trying to recognize what our circle of ignorance is, in a sense. We're trying to understand how little we know, and we need to find someone who can guide us through their knowledge. So what I'm getting is that we really want to have a longer conversation with Form in Place, which goes beyond simply, which takes us, I think, to at least 4 phases where after so we have to discuss what we're going to do with the next 15 grand, which may be that they continue doing similar test fits up North Main Street. Then the next phase after that will be them sitting down with us and coming up with specific vehicles for specific sites. So maybe a PUD is something useful. Maybe there's some other tool which would provide us the development. So essentially helping us winnow down the options to what works. And so that would be kind of phase 3. And at that point, we would we would start working with legal to come up with the zoning which describes that, and then their assistance with us in terms of visualizing that would be phase 4. So rather than asking for the whole enchilada after phase 2, we talk to them and say, hey, we want you to continue doing what you're doing, and we're going to invite you back for another 30K at least to finish the project all the way to the end. Is that a reasonable summation of a way forward?
That sounds. I mean, I think we like where they've taken us.
Mm-hmm.
We just want them to take us further.
So that is going to, of course, impact our budget. So if we've decided on that, then we're going to be looking at.
It's 80. Then it's 80. It adds it that it goes from 20 to 30 for that project. So then it goes to 80,000 for professional services.
Yep.
Isn't that where we were already?
No, we were at 70, and then now we're at 80, and now we're going from a $180,000 budget to 247.
And again, the case making is about the incredible development pressures and opportunities and needs that are attendant upon our town.
I mean,
how did we go from 180 to 240? Oh, 180 is what we had before.
180 was our like FY23 budget for everything all in was 180.
Right. Okay.
And now it's 247.
Yeah. And then that we're still and we're going to still ask for probably another 30K to them for phase 4. So that's going to chew up more of our budget later on. That will be probably in fiscal 9, whatever the heck fiscal
24. Is that 24? In fiscal 24?
No, this is fiscal 24.
So this would be in fiscal 25.
Yeah.
I don't know how you spell fiscal. I spelled it with a PH.
No, that's physical.
PHY.
PHY, yes. That's exactly how I was saying
it.
Yes.
So, by the way, they're going to be, just so we're clear, they're most likely, everyone is asking for a level service budget this year. Just so we're it's clear is that
I know there's a philosophical disconnect between what we're doing and what was presented to the department heads from FinCom. And I don't really know the way around that, except to say that we've done as much as we can with extremely limited budgets, and we're falling farther and farther behind in terms of our commitment to our goals.
So I would say that's the argument we make to FinCom. The thing we have to do is we need Plan B. And so the question is, if we present our budget as we like it, and they say, nope, you can't do that, what do we do? So I think it comes down to
they would just revert back to what they gave us last year is what they would do.
Yeah. But I would argue that we could make a counteroffer rather than just accepting their 45K. And so one of those counteroffers could be that we decide that the light industrial district takes a hiatus for a year. And instead of putting in 30K to phase 2 of Holton, Swanton Cross, we use that for phase 3 of North Main Street.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think try to excel at one thing that we can really bring forward.
I mean, I think so. Brian, you've included in that 240K the assistant planner position. Let's make I think the wise assumption that that's not going to fly. So what we're really looking at is a change in our professional services budget from 45K to right now, if we include everything, it's 45K up to 75 up to 80K. So that is actually realistically what we're asking for. is an increase from 45K to 80K. And if we're pushed to the wall, I would say, okay, well, we can remove the Holton Swanton Cross, which gets us the third, and then that will take us back down to 50K. And we would concentrate on North Main Street.
Yeah, I think you got a lot of time for the but I think the numbers are solid, which is good. But in terms of figuring out how the kind of the counter offer for FinCom, you have a decent amount of time for that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel much better going in and saying, we're going to ask for the assistant town planner. They're going to say no. We're going to say, yeah, we expected that. But now we're asking for 80K in professional services, and then we can negotiate down from that bit by bit and see if we can get somewhere in the middle, if that's required. But obviously, we push for as much as we can. So I think the next question is, if we've made if we come to a consensus upon making North Main Street our priority, then that means we're going to go ahead and talk to Foreman Place about turning this into at least a 3-phase project. And so that's something we need to talk about with them, so they understand that there's a little more breathing room in terms of the money. And Brian, but we still have to ask them, what's the next thing we would like them to do? Is it to do test pits up North Main Street? Do we want them to concentrate on a particular area?
I mean, I think it makes sense to just kind of do the next chunk that, but again, that kind of does depend on
back to what the next chunk would be. Where is the, come on, where did it go? Am I going back too far?
No, you just missed the parcels.
No, I was just going to say, so they've done that big chunk to the south. So the next chunk could be perhaps Swanton up to Woburn.
Yeah, the other end.
Because the ones in the middle are so constrained by, there's just not a lot you can do with those lots. They're tiny. Yeah. So maybe our biggest bang for the buck is to look at.
Yeah, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that much. I think it's a question, I guess, that we can ask them.
Some of the plots are historic assets, so that's something that we should kind of have them address as well, in terms of what we're going to at least develop, what we're going to at least keep the form of, if not the interiors. That I guess would be down the road, but it's certainly something that we should consider as we go forward.
They definitely consider that throughout all of this. Is like it's real test fits in terms of whether they think that something will likely be there or not, and it's a lot of it's based upon the maps that from MAPC in terms of areas that were historic were not areas for likely for change.
They did that. I'm going to get it wrong. Which one was it? When they looked at this lot right here, they gave us a couple where they maintained the historic.
Right. So they put it in gray. Sure.
Yeah, and they looked at kind of I forget where they looked at developments which included the historic, and like this one, I think they said no historic, and then what the heck happened? Here they include it and they built on top of it. So.
Right.
Yeah, we would certainly encourage them to think of how to incorporate the existing historic properties in their view of how to do things. But also, since we don't have really strong protection in this town for historical properties, we want them to also look at options, because we may end up with something.
That'd be great.
Yeah. So why don't so I guess the next step will be for Brian and I to reach out to form. Oh, I'm sorry. We never did. We never did come to a consensus. And I apologize. I got. I feel like the dog in Up, where someone said squirrel, where I said saw squirrel.
Well, it is the time where you summarize because we're almost on to our next segment.
Yeah. So I think if the idea would be that we move on to this large section between Swanton and the Woburn line. We'll ask them what sort of, if they were to do the same level of detail as they did on the lower part of North Main, how far that would get them. And we would include in that conversation that we are going to be extending the contract to at least a third phase, which would help us make decisions.
And I would add to that the fine point that in that GBD3 between Swanton and Woburn line, there's a very large property that is shaded red for change unlikely, which means that that kind of reduces the actual area of visualizing.
Yes, good point. Good point. So, anyway, so
the ones that are likely.
Okay. So if that's okay with everyone, and because I'm hosting, I cannot see everyone's face. I don't know why Zoom doesn't do
Yeah, but I'd like to add also that we really didn't digest all the options either. But like Sally said, it might be helpful for them to hear from us and for us maybe each to go through them and to actually acknowledge some of the work that they've done and to identify the characteristics of these different options, right? And to give comments back to them, because I'm not sure that we didn't discuss it here, but whether or not townhouses are better than a 3-story building or 4-story building or whatever the characteristics that they presented are, right? What they see. But I don't think that we have time in these sorts of meetings to go through that together. But I think it would be helpful for them to hear it from us, for us to see each other digest some of this.
So I think what I would suggest is that we, because we've run out of time this evening, that we have a really short discussion at our next meeting about the form, how we want to convey our thoughts to them.
That's a good strategy.
Because I know in the past we have sent it to them individually. But I think if we spend the next couple of weeks thinking about this, and I think now that we have a path forward, it might be easier to come up with things to tell them. It certainly is for me. So yeah. So why don't we think about what we want to do? Brian and I hopefully can get a hold of them over the next couple of weeks. I will tell them what our plans are and that we are going to send them some detailed responses in the near future. And the actual format is something that we haven't figured out yet.
But adding to that, Dia, I thought I heard I Ching say that she was thinking it would be really helpful for us to have a conversation with them. And if it can't happen, and I think she was saying, I Ching, that it's too much to do in a meeting. So were you saying that it would be a series of individual meetings with foreman, please?
No, I thought more kind of similar to what we did in the first time we gave comments to them. Was just sort of individual comments to Brian, and then Brian collected them, kind of a thing.
Yeah, we don't have the time to, or we don't have the money to pay them to have all of that individual time going to all those individual meetings. But yeah, we can certainly give comments and they can digest those.
Okay. I think I have an idea of where we're going with this. Which is good.
It is.
So I think if everyone's okay with that discussion, we have one more thing on our agenda.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a short 15 minutes talking about planner transition. So
it sounds like a huge topic that we need to somehow address in 15 minutes.
We cannot, and so this is more of an update and what the steps are coming ahead. There's 2 parts to this. I'm going to stop sharing. if that's okay with everyone.
Yes, please.
Excellent. So there are two parts of this. Okay, so there's the stuff happening behind the scenes in terms of making sure that we understand the work that Brian has been doing, and that we know we have an idea of what all the loose ends are. So that's the part that is happening with Brian, Sally, and myself behind the scenes. And so I don't know that really is much we can talk about here, because it's all the things you would expect. Talking to Suzanne Gill, figuring out what administrative tasks can be transferred, what contacts need to be maintained, things like that. We know I've spoken to, when Sally and I met with Mark Tuget and Beth, whenever we did in the last week and a half, we discussed some of the things that we depend upon Brian for doing. So, for instance, analysis of the ZBA permits and site plan reviews, which we rely on him to go through them and analyze the drawings and look at and see how they corroborate, or how they fit our zoning. The idea would be that we would be able to hire someone on a temporary basis, sort of to help with those analyses. And so a few years back, when we were hiring for our assistant town planner, we had for a very short time, there were a number of candidates who were interested in part-time work. The idea is that we might be, and there was, for instance, some semi-retired planners who just wanted to do part-time work, and someone with that experience would help us do those analyses. The next big thing coming up, of course, is the Waterfield lot, which would come before this board. I know, Brian, you were thinking they would file before at the building department, but it seems like they first have to go through the select board this year to get select board approval, and then it would go to the building department for the permit application.
So yeah, technically, since this is in the CBD, it would actually end up going to Suzanne Gill in the engineering department as a CBD special permit. So this will not go through the building department, but yes, but you are correct in the fact that before they submit those plans to the planning board, it does need to be okayed by the select board, basically saying that it's in substantial conformity to the plan that was agreed upon, previously, which, it will. It's basically it's a provision of the land disposition agreement, the LDA, that they can't go for permitting unless they show the select board what we're talking about here.
Yeah. So the reason I bring that up is that Brian had been hoping to be able to review those plans prior to his leaving, but I don't know that that's going to be practical. So possibly
it might happen. It's possible. It's totally possible. But we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Is it likely that you'll have someone? I'm sorry. The question, is it likely that we'll have someone on a temporary basis who can get us through in terms of the?
It's not that it's unlikely. I just don't know. So I've been already been requested to at least see if that's even possible. Meaning for other people.
Well, all the stuff that you do that someone that the board would have to, someone would have to do, or is, I
think there would be some responsibilities that would potentially go to staff, and then other responsibilities that would most likely fall to the board in earnest. At this point, it would probably be a lot of Dieb and Sally, but they're obviously going to need help as much as possible over those, we're realistically talking 2 to 4 months.
Yeah, I think for the technical support, I don't know, but I am very hopeful that we can find someone to help us work through the blueprints and the zoning and all of that. So that's my hope, because to be honest, the thought of wading through all the blueprints and understanding everything is not my forte. And I don't think that the board, we've we've taken Brian's expertise for granted, and of course we so I think I know that the manager's office is supportive of us moving forward on that path, so that if we need funds to hire someone, then they will be made available on a temporary basis. So I plan on pursuing that with the board's okay, because I think that's possibly the only way we're going to survive until we get a new planner who will, of course, have to ramp up. And so
I'm just concerned that a lot's going to, the demands on you guys as the leaders, I would not want those to get out of hand.
You'll hear us scream, Nick. Please don't worry about that. I don't know what. Yeah, Brian.
So I was gonna say one thing that I was gonna talk about that. So I did talk with the chair of the historical commission, Jack Lemenager, as I play a large role in the managing of these annual grants that they apply for, and there's a lot of paperwork and admin associated with that. So he's going to be, I've set everything up that needs to get set up for the rest of the fiscal year. So there's not going to be needing, any contract or other weird other admin work. Jack is fine with doing the rest of that. And I think the one thing to quickly talk about is specifically the local historic district study committee for Sims Corner. So this is kind of a project that completely fell to the wayside during COVID, and it still hasn't come out basically over the past year, where it potentially could have, but for a number of reasons. Some of it was we were waiting for some survey and planning work to be done, but right now that is going to try to get revived. And I was thinking, I know Nick and Kurt, I believe you guys had talked about helping out. And that's one thing that's going to need help in terms of getting off the ground. So in terms of alleviating anything off of Dieb and Sally, that's definitely one project that is going to need some blood.
Is one of those demands going to be simply getting the group together?
Yeah, a lot of it is physically doing it, and I think the idea was to have a kickoff event of the neighborhood to try to get them educated about exactly what type of gem of a neighborhood that they live in, because a lot of people think of it as, oh, this is really cool, but they don't really necessarily think of it as historic. They're like, why aren't you doing the flats, or why weren't you doing some other place? And then when we start teaching, or not, I shouldn't say teaching, when we just start having conversations with the neighborhood, we've already seen that they it's just it becomes even more special to them in terms of just letting the truth out. So the idea is that but yes, organizing in an event, getting the meetings going up and running again, the admin associated with that is certainly going to be important over the next, realistically, 3 to 6 months.
I have a question about that, Brian. I'm sorry, Dieb. Oh, wait.
I was just going to say that I've also spoken with Jack, and the support that Brian gives historical came up in Sally and mine's discussion with the town manager's office, and they are also amenable to hiring someone to do some of that. And there's a question as to, because apparently that LHD effort can't be led by the historical commission. So the question of who can be a proxy for the town. And so at least one name came up of a professional in the area who would be of help. So I think there's also support there that we can go for.
Yeah, we've really enjoyed Brian on the historical commission as the liaison. He's going to be sorely missed there. So hopefully we can figure that out going forward.
Yeah, I think, Sally, you wanted to say something.
No, I just had a question about Sims Corner, and Brian, help me, because I don't know if I'm remembering the sequence or the outcome. The last thing I knew was that there were several homeowners who were very interested in having their house be part of the local historic district, and possibly an equal number of homeowners who were not. And it was resulting in a patchwork quilt district. And there was some determination at the state level that that doesn't work, or I don't know. And so kind of that's the last thing I knew.
That's a pretty good, that's a pretty accurate description of the history of it. I think there were several. I want actually not several. There was one or two public meetings that this was talked about.
Right.
And the idea was to first start doing more outreach because, like I said, there was a lot of people that didn't understand the significance of the neighborhood.
Okay, so that's the phase that this is in.
So the idea is that like, okay, 2 steps backward, let's do more outreach and because basically what everyone found out, and we found out, to our face, is that most of these LHD efforts, like nearly all of them, so it's the large majority of them, they're successful when it's from a ground swelling up from the neighborhood,
right.
not the, and this was a small ground swelling, but most of the neighborhood is like, is uninterested. Not that they don't care about their neighborhood, but they just don't see it as a problem. They don't see it as a fear of demolition. Whereas there's some areas of that neighborhood that are seeing the demolition fears in real time.
I think what prompted it was a house on Grove Street that the people had bought it. They were on demo delay, and then they decided to move. Is that right?
It's a Greek revival house.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I could ask us to, we will discuss the Sims Corner LHD in detail later. We have 2 minutes left.
Right.
I want to bring you up a couple more things up to date with this transition process. So the position description that we worked on about 6 months ago now is we finally got it. The town manager's office wanted to review it. We finally managed to connect whenever we had the meeting with Beth and Mark, and they had a what I think is to them an important, but to us a minor correction in terms of being explicit that the responsibilities of the planner are limited to the purview of the planning board. So I thought it was self-evident. They wanted it to be in there in writing. So there was a very small change. I didn't think it made any difference to the overall framework that we had set up.
Now, how does that impact the services that Brian provided to the historical commission? Because sort of as a member of the planning board, I'm also involved in the historical commission, and I sort
that's
on that.
So that's a separate issue in terms of what the duties, what the specific. So there's a difference between what the position description, which is sort of the overall framework, and then the explicit duties of the planner, which we write down when we essentially write the goals and requirements for how the planner, everything goes into the annual review is based upon, you have to do this, you have to do that, these are your goals for the next year. That I think is where we write down explicit duties. And I think there's also, so that's a separate thing from the position description, which as far as this board was concerned, we'd settled on months ago. So that is now, so the edits have been made to that, and it has to go through the personnel board, which unfortunately was originally scheduled for this evening. There's obviously a conflict. I can't be there, but it will now be coming forward next Tuesday before the personnel board. I presume that they will agree to it, in which case we can then begin the search process. So Brian has tendered his resignation with date certain, which means that we can actually start looking I will write color commentary, as Beth so well put it, to accompany the position description describing Winchester as a town, the different entities within town government that the planner operates in, some particulars about our history and development challenges and housing challenges. Those are the things that will give a better picture of the context of the job. And I will be working with Michael Town, who is in the HR department, because it all has to go through him for the posting. So with any luck, that will be, I could get that done by our next meeting in 2 weeks, because the planning, the position description won't be finalized or approved by the personnel board next week. So that will be put before you folks for your approval in a couple weeks, which means at that point we can probably start the search.
But you could start the search as soon as Brian, I guess.
We can't.
You know,
We could start today, but we have nothing to present them. We don't have a position description. We certainly don't want to give them
the position description doesn't have to be the same as the legal document that'll have to be passed at the town meeting in the spring.
No, it doesn't. No. But we do have to have it finalized by the personnel board.
The personnel board, in order to go out to the newspapers and
yes.
Right. It doesn't have to go towards spring. You don't. No. The position description has nothing to do with.
So those are two separate documents. One's a legal document and one is an advertising document.
I'm sorry, I'm really confused about this. What does town meeting have?
Town meeting is not. Yeah, I keep trying to say this. Town meeting is not involved with the position description.
Right. That's correct.
Yeah, the position description is our baby. It's what we decide as to what we want the town planner to do, and we've got that. And so then we just have, because we changed it, it just has to go through the personnel board for approval, because that's just the way you do it. So I don't see any obstacles to getting to starting to advertise in a couple of weeks. And then
I had suggested to you earlier, and maybe others on the board would be interested, to just put some feelers out or do some testing themselves to find the websites where town planners positions are often found, either in Massachusetts or across the country, if someone wanted to move from, somewhere else.
Yes.
So I just don't know where with the posting locations is what my point was.
Yeah. So that if people want to do that investigation, and Brian, we're going to reach out to you. One of our action items from our meeting with the town manager's office was to talk to you about other places to advertise. So the next step after that is to make a decision on how we're going to run the selection process. And I know that the chair of the historical commission, Jacqueline Menage, would love to be involved. I believe that we should also involve the principals within town hall that have such a close working relationship with the planning department. So that would be engineering, building, town managers. And it's not that we are the deciding body, but their input on how a particular candidate would work with them well, or they obviously have a better idea of what they need. So
that makes sense.
Yeah. So the question is, how do we manage that?
It seems a little more impartial in a way to have these outside,
Yeah. So the interviews are going to be public. And so the question is, how do we enable all of these interested parties to be part of that process? And we obviously are not going to come to a decision tonight, but I just want to let you know that I think that should be an important part we need to receive input from them. So we'll figure it out. So our next meeting, we'll set it. I believe we'll have time our next meeting. I will make sure. I don't think our agenda is completely filled up. So on our next meeting, we'll set aside time to discuss that process.
Great. That'd be great.
Brian, I was in your calendar, the planning board calendar today, and I saw that there weren't agenda items tentatively penciled in those calendar entries
There
like you've
should
been doing
be.
all year. I didn't see them.
I
here.
put some in myself for the 13th. We have a meeting with people from Mount Vernon on the 13th, and I have to get back to them. Shoot. Okay, so we did.
Yeah,
It should,
Maybe I was looking at it.
No,
incorrectly. I just didn't see any
got
agenda.
moved.
What?
yeah, you need to go. Don't look at Brian's calendar. Look at the planning
No.
board
It was the
calendar.
planning board calendar, and I would scroll up to the top.
Yeah.
Of the
Yeah, so now I've changed that.
Okay.
Hold on. Okay, so it wasn't at the top, the notes,
Oh,
so I just put them
okay.
out there. So it's ZBA petitions and 10 to 16 Mount Vernon Street. Those are the
Yeah.
two things that are on the agenda for next time.
And we
Okay.
have to. And for some reason, I just got it canceled for our meeting today from you, Brian. Okay, that's weird.
Well, yeah, so I'm in it. I'm not seeing them. I'm sorry. I'll just have to follow up.
Yeah. So
Done.
we
Done.
will. Yeah. So I will make sure that's on our agenda. Other than that, I don't think there's a lot to update you folks on. But we will figure out, hopefully over the next several weeks, those areas where we're going to have to work together as a team, and those areas where we can't. So,
Sorry, this is going to take 30 seconds, but I think just to be clear, sorry, not to be clear, just to be sure, I think we should, there should be a vote of the planning board to approve a budget of 247,331. And if someone just
Will you put it up on the
So
screen?
moved.
yeah, I will put it.
I
up.
second.
Yeah, that's the actual.
I move to adjourn.
Yeah, that too.
there's a motion on the table. We got to
Here
vote
it
on
is.
that
It was,
first.
and
Thank you
this
for
is,
doing that, Brian.
yeah, just
Thank
to
you,
make sure.
Brian.
I don't think it's necessary, but just in case it is, so it was. Yeah, the number that I said was correct, and it was. Kurt
Can you
got
scroll
it
to the
first.
top so we can see the whole thing?
Sure.
Oh, now you can't see the bottom. But whatever. Okay.
Fine.
Whatever.
It's we assume there's no that the numbers are all
No.
okay.
Yeah.
What is I can't see the personnel line now. The 150931. Okay.
Okay. We've had a
You got a first and a second discussion.
roll call vote, please. Oh, discussion. I think we've discussed this already.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's do a roll call vote. Kurt,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
Yi Ching,
Bye.
Sally,
Aye.
and I say aye as well. Aye. Okay. And now we're going to take up Nick's
Yeah, Nick
motion
had a
to
motion.
adjourn.
Yeah.
Do we
I
hear a
second.
second?
You got three.
Okay.
Unanimous second.
It's a unanimous second. Roll call. Kurt,
Aye.
Nick,
Aye.
Yi Ching,
Bye.
Sally,
Aye.
and I, DM, say aye as well. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you to Nancy, our recording secretary. Thank you for Brian Manter, who once again stuck through this. For Brian,
And
we think
Richard
there's something
Lee.
wrong with you.
Richard just woke up. Yeah.
Richard, wherever you are, thank you, and thank you to our other two guests who showed up.
Laura and Maureen. Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Brian, and thank you, WinCam, and we will see you all in a couple of weeks. Have a great 2 weeks.
Right.